So welcome back. I'm here with Master Astrologer Laura Nalbandian. In this session, we're going to take a look at the chart that Laura's been looking at. And Laura will say something about the extra points that she uses in the chart, apart from the basic planets. So Laura, guide us through where you'd start, what you'd prioritize, and how you might articulate some of these placements, please.
Certainly. From evolutionary astrology's point of view, Pluto becomes the primary point we start at. So Pluto represents the soul. As I spoke earlier, in the soul, there are two dueling desires, the desire to separate, the desire to return. All of that over time certainly describes the soul's deepest emotional attachments. It can describe certainly where the soul has been wounded, where it has its deepest complexes. Pluto, as the modern ruler of Scorpio, represents the death, birth, death, birth, death, birth element, that evolutionary wheel, the karmic wheel. And it certainly represents the hidden, the underlying, the deeper elements. Pluto, as the god of the underworld, certainly is connected to that. So Pluto represents the soul, its evolutionary journey. Added to that, so we look at that by house. The sign that it's in is a generational component. So for me, it's not a direct personal experience where the person as an individual and the soul is doing its work is via the house. And then we look to part of the additional karmic picture, what we might call the karmic axis, is then to the south node of the moon. And then from there, we're looking at the sign the south node is in, the house the south node is in. We're looking at the dispositor. For those who don't know what a dispositor is the planet that rules the sign of the point or planet in question. So our point or planet in question, this is a point versus not a planet. The south node is in Cancer. The planet that rules this sign is the moon. So we would look at Pluto in the 6th house, south node in Cancer in the 3rd, with the dispositor, the moon, being in the 4th house in Leo. There's lots of other things to add to that. From there, I would go to what planets might be sitting on the south node. In this case, there is a planet on the south node. We would look to planets square the nodes. There you have Pluto squaring the nodes and Venus squaring the nodes. Those are all important dynamics. Before I go on to describe what some of those things might mean, we would then just methodologically speaking, this is where the soul is coming from. Then we want to look to where the soul is going to in this lifetime. What did the soul call us? What does the soul call us to? So we would be then looking at what we call the polarity point of Pluto's house placement. And so in this particular chart, we'd be looking at the polarity point as the 12th house. Then in addition to that, we would then look at the north node as the path of growth, as the path that we are challenged to move to. It is where the south node is the path of least resistance. The north node can often be called the path of greatest resistance. It's what we're uncomfortable with, right? So then we're looking at the polarity point of the Pluto placement, the north node, and its sign house. So in this case, Capricorn in the 9th house. And we would be looking at the dispositor of this north node. It's in Capricorn, so that's ruled by Saturn. And it's back here on the south node, which has all these nodal connections, have very specific rules to them and how we read them in evolutionary astrology. So then you just start, blending elements from there.
Wow.
So that's the technique. Would you like me to kind of launch into, or did you have any questions about methodology?
No, that's a great summary. And I realize we haven't said this. Some of the astrologers have picked their own charts. Here, you were very happy to have a chart that I picked, and I think I picked one that's probably a doozy when it comes to all of those things,
Yeah.
with realizing it. Yeah.
Yeah, without realizing it, there you have some of the biggest dynamics in evolutionary astrology. Pluto square the nodes, Venus square the nodes, Saturn on the south node. It's the ruler or dispositor of the north node. Those are big things, definitely big things. So, any questions then from you before I launch?
No, I'm
Great,
no, fascinated. Thank you.
great. So, what we want to start with then is Pluto by house, and so we have the sixth house. And as I coach and teach students, I have them write down or sort of catalog in their brain what are some of the things that you can think about with the sixth house? What are some of the things that you would naturally associate with the Virgo qualities, the natural Virgo qualities that are associated with the sixth house? Now, you traditional astrologers can get your knickers in a twist over this. I do not believe that that houses and signs are the same. They are different. However, I do associate houses with their signs. I know, horror of horrors, but it's true. I am a modern astrologer. I have been doing this for 30 years, 35 years probably. And this is what works for me. This is what works for my clients. This is what works for my students. I believe that associating and aligning the houses or correlating them to the signs shows us deeper, gives us depth and deeper meaning to the planetary placements from an internal personal level. I am not prone always to using the houses as externalized places, though I agree that's what they're associated with. So that the sixth house is the place of work, and it is the place of service. And when dealing with transits and progressions, I am looking at those things. But when I'm reading the natal chart, I'm not looking to the place of work. I'm taking the concepts of work, service, servitude, analysis, perfectionism, crisis, sacrifice, the Virgo sacrifice to service, all come into play for this soul. This is a soul has for many, many lifetimes been in service to other. And in this case, you're looking at the Venus on the south node. We can take that, we know that Pluto's in Libra, and that is ruled by this Venus here in the sixth house. And so this is an individual and a soul who has tried to fix and heal. We often call sixth house Pluto's and sixth house Venus, or sixth house in Virgo, certainly with the Virgo sun adds to it. We kind of give them the Florence Nightingale archetype, that, they tend to attract the walking wounded. They are often in service to those they attract into their lives to try to fix them. They often exhaust themselves time and time again. And in this case, this is a soul that has given up its needs time and time again for others. This is a Venus in Libra. We say our needs, and particularly in evolutionary astrology, essential needs. Now, there's some caveats to this that I'm going to point out. But before I get to the caveats, I want to give you support for my theory. So I'm going to make myself a note because my mind works at 100 miles an hour, and I'm going to write down caveats so I don't forget. But I do want to give some supporting themes for this. So we do have part of the supporting theme to this narrative is the Venus in Libra in the sixth, supporting that. Added to that, we have a south node in Cancer. It is disposed by the moon in the fourth. It's in Leo. So there's been some ego associated with, I can fix you. If I just throw a lot of energy at this, I can fix you. I can give you words of wisdom. I can give you words of advice. I can see very clearly what you need. Let me fix it for you. Let me take care of it for you. A very caring, loving, big-hearted human for sure, but giving too much away, right? Saturn on the south node. Let me give you some technique on a planet on the south node as quickly as possible. There are one of three, my arthritis, let's go this way. One of three outcomes. One is that the planet on the south node shows that this soul has done everything it needed to do and is reaping the benefit of that hard work. We call that fruition, plucking the fruit from the tree. This is very rare. In this case, in this chart, it is not complete and utter fruition. There's too many challenging aspects to the node and the planet on the south node to show us that this is fruition. Complete relive, also very rare. That means soul, for whatever reason, didn't get some of the work done or didn't get any of the work done. Could have been an abbreviated or aborted life in some way, cut short, whatever. We don't know, and it doesn't matter. Soul is back to do it. In this case, we do not have complete and utter relive either, because there are some sextiles from Mars to the Saturn and South node. Option number 3, which is the most common, and it's a combination of 1 and 2. That means that the soul has done some work, it is reaping benefit of work done, and it has a lot of work to do. This is also reinforced by these planets square the nodal axis, which also shows work has been done. So the I know I was going to give some caveats, and I wrote down caveat, and now, what I wanted to say is that some of the caveats are, in fact, the work that has been done. The planets square the nodes have shown the soul. Think of planets square the nodes as a big puzzle. It's a big, huge puzzle. It's complex. And the soul's been working on this puzzle for a while. It's been working on the Pluto-Venus conjunction in the 6th house puzzle. Let's call it that. And for whatever reasons, again, we call planet square the node skip steps. Sometimes through hubris or arrogance or whatever, the soul or the individual thinks, I don't need to do that. I can cut that corner. In some cases, it's, again, no fault of their own. Work didn't get done, but work did get done, and it wasn't completed, and that's fine. Evolution takes time. There's no judgment here. It just is what it is. So the pieces have been put into the puzzle, and there are some key critical pieces missing around Pluto-Venus conjunction in Libra in the 6th, intercepted. By the way, we use porphyry house system in evolutionary astrology. We do not use whole sign houses or any of the other house systems. We use porphyry. So that these key pieces, as the soul begins to put these pieces into place, there are big, huge evolutionary leaps that the soul experiences. So part of the dynamics for this soul in this lifetime have everything to do with establishing better boundaries, knowing what their limits are in terms of how much they can give away to people. There's a part of the narrative of the soul built into this Pluto 6th house Venus, given along with this sun in Virgo, that says that I don't deserve, Virgo, I don't deserve to have a perfect relationship. I'll take a fixer-upper and fix her or him up to make him or her the relationship. And by sacrificing to that, I will deserve to have the relationship be healthy, which never comes about, by the way. And what happens is that they're giving so much of themselves away, they lose themselves in the relationship. And in order for a relationship to survive well enough, it needs to have some dynamic tension, some healthy tension. We need differentiation between two people. And what this does here is it can at times over-align itself, unconsciously becoming what they think the other person may want them to be. So another caveat in this chart is this Uranus in the 6th. So in evolutionary astrology, we look at Uranus as the liberation point, one of the liberation points and the individuation point of the soul and consciousness. And it also describes to me a soul that has been, in fact, working steadily. And it, well, can't be steadily, it's not Saturn. Uranus has been working, certainly the soul has been working in fits and starts to break free, to break out of the dynamics of overly caretaking and enabling other people, and then enabling their own patterns, not addressing their own needs, and so on. Breaking out and liberating and breaking free from the guilt patterns that have locked them into these patterns. The underlying narratives of guilt, I'm not perfect enough, I'm not good enough. But again, if I try to save and sacrifice myself to these other people, then all will be well. There's a lack of confidence in this chart. that speaks of a Jupiter retrograde. It speaks of a Saturn on the south node. It speaks of a Virgo sun. It speaks of a sixth house Pluto. These are elements where the individual has doubted themselves at key points in their lives. Any questions?
No, no, that's fascinating. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Is that making sense?
Yep, absolutely. Yes, it's yeah, it's a new area, so I'm absorbing it all. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm a Leo rising. I like to get a little bit of feedback. I just like to know, okay, yeah, because one of the, just for you to know and for people who watch this to know, I was trained by my mother and Jeffrey to read a chart when it was put in front of me, to not pre-read a chart, to not pre-assess a chart, to wait until the person is there or someone who knows the person who can sort of energetically infuse the moment, give it life, even without words, right? So I used to do, back in the day in the bookstore, we would do psychic fairs on every solstice and every equinox. So 4 times a year, minimum, we would do psychic fairs in a bookstore. And I would do astrology readings, 20-minute readings. Someone would walk up with a chart, they'd sit down, I would have to read the chart. I got 20 minutes. I've got probably 30 seconds to pull something together to start talking. And so I would do 15, 16 of those a day for 2 days, 4 times a year. And sometimes more. We would do odd psychic fairs and I would do the astrology readings. So there was lots of practice of reading a chart in the moment. This is how my mother did it. This is how Jeffrey did it. And this is how I do it. And again, it works for me. It doesn't work for everyone. Not everyone can just feel they can launch into a chart. And I much prefer, in many ways, to do a chart of someone I don't know. Then I know I'm not importing what I think I know of them into the reading. It is just straight astrology that I'm going on right here. And hopefully I'm getting there. It's always kind of a scary moment when you think, well, you know what? I could be getting this all wrong.
Well, I imagine it's like a internship in an emergency room, really, if you're doing that, where Jeffrey and your mum landed you in that. But yes, you need to deliver.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's true.
it's
And
like
so,
yeah.
what was that?
It's like being on the phone lines, and then people are paying $4 or $5 a minute or whatever they pay, and you can't just and ah and keep them waiting. Oh.
No, and I love the Pluto methodology because I can always start with Pluto and I can talk about Pluto where it sits, build a story, go on to the South Node, look to its ruler, start building a story. And the karmic picture I can pretty much flesh out a karmic picture in 10 to 15 minutes. And then if, I've scribbled in some transits and can talk about where Pluto is transiting, where the soul is doing its work right now, and that sort of thing. One of the interesting things I see about this chart, there's many interesting things I see about this chart, but I'll point them out nonetheless. I'll try to point them out. We have a Taurus rising and a Mars and Taurus on the ascendant. This, by its nature, is self-reliant, independent, my way or the highway. I'm not, Taurus, Mars, and I have a Mars and Taurus. It doesn't easily bend to other people's will. And you'll see this dotted green line going from Mars and the ascendant right over here to Pluto. And you can see that the discord or the potential for discord from his desire to accommodate and appease, to make people happy, to be in service to other people's well-being, can run counter and cause stress to him physically, because the ascendant and Mars and Taurus, very physically embodied. So there's stress here that can happen. So when he anchors over here, this can trigger anger and frustration, can get internalized, can get expressed. Taurus will internalize, the Mars on the ascendant will express. If he centers over here to me, mine, my stuff, I got to do what I got to do, then the stress comes to this side. And the stress of feeling the pressure of Is that going to upset other people? Are they going to be mad at me? Are they going to be unhappy? Are they going to not like me? This creates stress for a Pluto-Venus conjunction in Libra in the 6th, right? So, and it's ruled, again, let's talk about dispositors. This is Taurus, Mars in Taurus, Taurus rising. And the planet that rules this Taurus is our little Venus over here. So there she is over there, the ruler of this. And I get that what it seems to me, where I would go with this, is that more often than not, this person sacrifices their desires and their needs for others. Because the Venus pulls it back. The ruler of this chart and the dispositor of Mars the Venus pulls it back to its old pattern. And the square to the node creates tension. The square to Saturn creates tension, right? And that's the thing, you're at this crossroads. If you stand on Venus and Pluto, you're looking to the left, you're looking at the past. I'm responsible to caretake for other people. That's my job. Saturn and Cancer on the South Node. Or is it my responsibility to foster my own growth, right? And so the 9th house in evolutionary astrology has to do with our philosophical beliefs, our growth, our larger perspective. Sagittarius and Jupiter are associated with this house. So this is the expansion of consciousness through a larger cosmological frame of reference. What do other people think? What do other cultures believe? So expanding our consciousness, and this is his job to do that growth. Again, because these planets are square, the Venus, Pluto, Saturn's on the South Node, the ruler of the North Node. He cannot forsake others. He cannot forsake them because even the ruler of the North Node's calling him back to the past. So sometimes, here's the narrative for a ruler of the North Node on the South Node. Sometimes you feel like you think you're moving forward when you're only repeating the past. Yeah. On the other hand, what the ruler of the North Node tells us on the South Node is, as I said, you cannot forsake this element. You cannot leave it behind. It's calling you to the 3rd house to think. It's calling you to, yes, there are different ways of perceiving the world. The mutable houses and mutable signs, and 3-9 is mutable, 6-12 is mutable. These are mutable cadent houses, and they have to do with relative perspective for me. They're about a relativity of view, that in Gemini in the 3rd house, there's 2 or more ways of thinking of things, right? In the 9th house, there are a multiplicity. There are many ways of believing in the world. There are more than one truth, and truth is, in fact, relative depending on where you're standing. So in this case, this soul is really trying to get a sense of a relative perspective. What does it all mean? And is it true that is it true that he is responsible for the emotional needs of others? Is it his job? No, it's not. I would be making the case that it's not his job. And that in fact, he disables and enables other people in their unhealthy behavior by taking on the job of trying to fix and heal and nurture others. When he stands tall in his own reality, when he has the wisdom, North Node in Capricorn, the wisdom and maturity that has been developed through a belief system or aided by the development of a belief system, when he has the wisdom and maturity to understand everybody has their own path, then what he does is he transmits energetically to others that in a way he believes in them. It's your responsibility. I can hold space for you to take this on instead of me disabling you and treating you like a child and trying to take care of it for you. Right?
Fascinating. And it's interesting because it feels like the 2 areas of his chart that could be for himself, the Mars rising and the North Node in Capricorn, are a little bit let down, or at least at the mercy of the Venus, Pluto you were talking about, and also the Saturn that rules the
In a
node.
way, yeah, it's heavily weighted to that. But the good news, as I said, these squares to the nodal axis actually are good news. And the reason they're good news is because there's been so much work done. Let me give you a juxtaposition to this. Planets on the south node, the analogy would be like an onion that you're constantly peeling the layer of. You just keep getting to deeper and deeper and deeper cores, but you keep cycling back around to it. Planets square the nodes. When you start putting those puzzle pieces in place, it's like a big slingshot arrow that shoots you forward in your evolution. Let me give you an example. I have Mercury square the nodes. To say that I couldn't communicate my way out of a paper bag prior to my Saturn return in my late 20s and 30s would be an understatement. To be able to string ideas together, I took D's in failing grades in classes on purpose because I would not do the work. I wouldn't stand up in front of class and speak and do a report. I wouldn't write reports. I had a lot of underlying story around it about humiliation and failure. Mercury and Capricorn square the nodes in the 5th house. So humiliation, failure, all of that is my story. It took a crisis in the 90s. Was it the 90s? It was the late 80s. It was the late 80s. I was in a study group, and a former student came back in the study group, former co-student of mine, and we were looking at my Mercury-Uranus quincunx. I have Mercury square the nodes, and it quincunxes Mercury, or Uranus. And he said to me, "You have no authentic voice. You are only a parrot of your mother and Jeffrey," which was my worst fear. You know, that was my internal story. And I got very defensive, of course. And the next day, my voice was gone. I literally developed laryngitis overnight. And my voice was gone for 3 days. And by the 3rd day, all this internalized analysis, I found my voice, and it came back, and I found my way to speak and put my thoughts together in the moment. And today I consider myself a fairly decent communicator. Now, that was the work that needed to happen. And in that process of integrating what I needed to integrate, and trust me, it's not all integrated, that there was a huge leap in evolution for me, being able to stand up in front of people. I've done my own internet broadcast show, one of the earliest ones in the late 90s. I've done television. I've done regular radio. I've taught classes. I've stood up in front of large audiences. So that's the beauty and the juice about a planet square the nodes. Does that mean everybody will do it? No, but you can. And that's the juice in this chart. If he can find a balance, that's the Venus in Libra. If he can find a balance between, now on the outside, it looks like a balance between his needs and other people's needs. For me, my narration of that, or my articulation of that, my communication of that and description of that would be, it needs to be a balance between your needs and your concept of other people's needs and your impulse to fulfill other people's needs. Because once he starts thinking about other people's needs, he's back in the conundrum of being pulled back into it. So trying to balance, how do I balance between my needs and everybody else's? That's the whole thing that's going on in his chart.
And what's bizarre as well, of course, is that what we think, when we realize other people's needs, often it's simply they need us to be happy. And we're adding so much more to the idea of what we should be delivering for them as well, perhaps. Yeah.
Well, Libra's like being in a room with nothing but mirrors. Pure Libra, that objective. There's all you have of yourself is what's reflected back to you. Right? Aries is like being in a room with no mirrors. There's no reflection. It's all subjective. It's an internal dynamic of self, what you have. Right? And so when you take Libra and you take all their mirrors away, all the other out of their lives, as because other becomes the mirror, reflecting back to them what they think they should be, who they are, and giving them identity through the relationship and the reflection. When you take that away, they struggle to know who they are. But yet that's the call. The call is to courage. The call is to action. The call is to, through their own initiated experience, Aries, they help shape and define their identity from those experiences. And the balance that has to happen, yes, we have to have Aries Libra. There is a dynamic balance. We have to listen and take in what other people are saying, take in what other people are experiencing, but we must balance it, marry it to, in some way, extract from those experiences, what does it mean to me? Right? What does it mean to my experience? How does it shape and inform who I am? So I think, another thing, as we look at some of these extra bodies in the chart, these are asteroids. This is Pallas Athena. Ceres is here. That looks like the little, it is the scythe, the site for cutting wheat, the wheat stalk. The little, as one of my students called this, the flower pot. This is Juno. And the flame down here is Vesta. So there's a couple of things that jump in my head. First of all, Pallas Athena is the champion of the just and right cause. And so this is a soul, again, this reinforms this down here. This is where the soul has put a lot of its energy. And a lot of its energy has gone into deeply supporting and being the champion of other people, defending them, standing up for their causes, and so on. What the soul is being called to, and all this little Leo down here seems to be, you might think, I've ignored it. Such a powerful, big archetype. But I get here that it has been overshadowed in so many ways. I think this is, I think inside this is a funny, clever, kind person, as I said. Mercury and Leo certainly can tell a story and be funny. But he has Vesta here, and Vesta is the keeper of the flame. She has a sacred duty. Often it's misplaced. And so given this chart, I think that this is an individual who has felt it's their duty to use their voice, not for their own self-aggrandizement, but to, in some ways, get approval, to use the stories to make other people laugh, possibly given the Virgo qualities in this chart of the sun and the sixth house Pluto, could be some self-deprecating humor as a way of deflecting, but humor nonetheless.
Right.
I think that there's a great storyteller here, and he has a passion. He has a passion to speak, to create, to articulate, but I'm seeing it sort of overridden by other things in the chart. There is what's called a yod to this Jupiter. You can see the sun, you see that dotted green line. For those who may not know, that's another quincunx that looks like a little picnic table. Modern astrologers call that an inconjunct. This was Ptolemy's nickname, colloquials, yeah, I'll not say that word, but it's slang, in other words, for a quincunx. There are actually two types of inconjuncts, and that are signs that are either next to one another, from Virgo to Libra, Virgo to Libra for sure, Leo to Virgo. Signs next to one another are semi-sextile if they're within orb, and they are known as an inconjunct, and their symbol is actually upside down picnic table. You can see it right there. It's that little black, can you see it down there? Am I circling it well enough? It looks like an upside down picnic table, and it's also that inconjunct. So these are signs that often don't get along by quality, element, dynamics. And one's fire, one's yang, one's yin, being masculine, feminine, although those aren't terms I use yang and yin. One's externally manifest, one's internally manifested. It's going to be earth to air, fire to water. They don't get along, typically. However, there are certain pairs of inconjuncts or quincunxes that do have something in common. And in this case, Virgo in my opinion, Virgo to Aquarius definitely has something in common. And that is that Aquarius supports the theory that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one of the few. Humanitarian. You can have the lone wolf Aquarian, go my own way, sort of the Rudyard Kipling, the cat who walks by himself, turns his back on society and goes his own way or her own way, marching to her own or his own drumbeat. That's certainly that quality. But there's also the side of Aquarius that says, again, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one of the few. And its opposing sign is Leo, which says me, me, mine, right? So there's some elements of me, me, mine that are overweighed and overshadowed by everybody else. The sense that if I even listen to my own needs and desires, I am being selfish. That somehow I will harm others through even the consideration of my own needs. So there is some of that I would pick up from this. And you've got this yod, you've got two quincunxes. You've got the Sun quincunx Jupiter, and you've got Saturn quincunx Jupiter along with the South Node. And then filling in at the base is a sextile, a 60-degree angle between Saturn and the Sun. And they're very tight. And this also imports some strength, telling me that he has the ability to establish boundaries. He has the ability to do the work he needs to do, to have the maturity to understand his limits. He has that ability. He has the ability to use this in an unhealthy way too, and that sextile doesn't stop that behavior. But this yod, it's called a yod, the finger of God going to Jupiter, which in evolutionary astrology, again, we focus on Jupiter in terms of our belief systems. And for me, Jupiter represents confidence. I don't use the concept of luck. I think luck is a victim narrative because you're just waiting for something good to happen to you instead of waiting for something bad to happen to you. And as my Capricorn husband and I, we actually found out we had the same theory. He says it's, I call it, how's ours different? Let me see. I say luck is opportunity meeting preparedness. And he says luck favors the prepared. These are old narratives, but they're the same, right? So, you know, hope, and his favorite one is hope is not a plan. And that's a good Capricorn kind of thing to say. And I agree, hope is not a plan. But nonetheless, what was that?
We've even got the Virgo Jupiter quincunx, so Virgo being about preparation and Jupiter being about opportunity. So that feels even more appropriate. Yeah.
Right. But we have a quincunx between them, and the Jupiter is retrograde. And the modern ruler of this Jupiter is back here in the 6th, opposing Chiron. There's lots of aspects that are going on. If you look at the traditional ruler, it's back to Saturn on the South Node, quincunxing or inconjuncting that Jupiter. So I think there's an issue around his, again, his own confidence. And I think when I look at a retrograde, I'm looking at reclaiming something. The soul is back to reclaim something, to re-walk a path, to rethink, redo, reinvestigate, re-examine, remember. All those really good re-words. Think about it this way. If all the planets in our, as we're looking at them, again, retrograde going back across the sky, it's really not going back across the sky. It's a perception place, right? We're geocentrically oriented, so everything that we do in astrology is based on what we see in the sky from our perspective, not necessarily what's directly happening. Planets aren't going backwards. So if we imagine all the planets going around the sun in one direction, and all of a sudden the planet's going, not all of a sudden, but by, you know, its motion, it goes retrograde, it's going against the grain. Yeah. So it's fighting, in some cases, upstream. It can be fighting its own old pattern. It can be fighting conditioning that comes from culture, parents, but certainly fighting against karmic conditioning. These are old patterns. But reclaiming one's confidence, reclaiming one's intuition, and I would frame that in a way that says relearning how to trust what you already know to be true. Because this is an intuitive person, Um, there's a lot of instinct and intuition that's going on here, I believe. And he overanalyzes and second guesses himself. That's the sun in Virgo quincunx the Jupiter. The ruler of, or the dispositor of the Jupiter is Uranus in the sixth. And overanalysis, second guessing, if it's not going to be perfect, if I can't know it's going to be perfect, then I'm not going to do it, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big themes of his life. Yes, absolutely. The second guessing and being the pleaser. So it's fascinating how you've come to those points using your own tools, and seeing that underlined in so many ways. So thank you for that. Yeah, that's fascinating. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Okay, you've done a huge amount. I really appreciate everything. Did you have a question? Did you want to know a bit of info about him or not? Are you happy to leave it? How can we help?
I'm all good. If I've missed it, I would like to know. If I am in the neighborhood, that's good. If I'm on the mark, that's great.
Yeah, well, it was never set up to be a test, of course. It's just,
right?
What's fascinating is that what's defined this friend of mine who I've known for many years is the need to try and keep the family happy, and they're strong. They're very religious Asian families who have been trying to get him married and settled down, and there's been a constant battle over the years with making the right choice in relationships, and then breaking it up, and then not wanting to disappoint. So everything that you've touched upon is really at the core of what has been the evidence or the result of his life, and that is a whole string of broken engagements, unhappy, annulled marriages, all sorts of things. We're trying to keep everybody happy.
Everybody happy.
Yeah.
And you nailed it. This is the core of the chart. How it's manifested in his life is, you can see. But the core of the chart, this is where it's coming. This is the seeds of the soul's evolution. What is he meant to do in this lifetime is to go from the sixth house Pluto of the self-doubt and service to the family and other, to develop his own, for lack, some people don't have a spiritual life, but to retreat within himself away and be still and be silent so he can listen. He's got too much noise from other people crowding in on him all the time. And that mind of his constantly assessing and analyzing, trying to strategize. If I adapt here, then this outcome will be better. Constantly trying to adapt himself so that he can make people happy all the time. And it's never working. So I think he needs some stillness. I think he needs a retreat away from other people. He doesn't need to abandon them. But he needs to be away from them so he can hear his own voice, so he can address his own needs, so he can start saying, what do I want? And letting the adults in his life have their feelings. If they're unhappy, that's their feelings to have. He doesn't need to take it on. It isn't about him. Their feelings and their emotions speak about them. They do not speak about him. And that's how the North Node, part of the North Node in Capricorn, certainly in the ninth houses, can develop a belief system, a very mature, formulated belief system that he can hold to, that gives him frame in his life, that gives him understanding. He does not have to take these things on. They're not his stories. They're their stories, and it's okay.
Thank you. I think that's very wise advice, wise counsel for that. Thank you. Thank you so much, Laura. That's been really,
Frank.
Really eye-opening, and you put your heart and soul into it as well. So I appreciate all the energy. Thank you again for supporting westsidebaby.org and for being the master astrologer you are. So I really, truly appreciate that. And again, thanks for your time.